Good morning, good morning. Raees Mohamed here from R. Warner Law, having another coffee and conversations. And today, so lots of fuss going on about the Robinhood app, lawsuits, class actions, can they stop us from trading, death threats, people in the Reddit forums, all kinds of craziness, it seems, relating to the halting of Robinhood's decision to halt trading of a handful of shares, right? I think there were about maybe five to 10 stocks that the brokerage essentially said, sorry, you can sell, but you can't buy anymore, which is unusual. It's definitely unusual, but we wanted to chat about that today. But before we chat about that, let's chat about coffee. Ooh, one of my personal favorites. This one's a bit strong. Brazilian coffee, which was just roasted like a few days ago. And that's the beauty of having a local coffee shop that imports their own bean and you know exactly when the bean was roasted. And this is the geisha coffee from Peixoto, my personal favorite. Anyway, if you guys are watching this and you are having some coffee, tell me what kind of coffee you're having. I'm a big coffee aficionado. I feel like a lawyer by de facto makes you that way. But I also appreciate the taste of coffee. It's not just about the caffeine for me. I don't know. This one has like a nuttier, chocolatey type of taste. It's very smooth. I'm drinking it black. And it's actually sweet. You don't need creamer. That's how coffee is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be bitter. Most of you guys drink coffee, which is, not to hate on anyone in particular, but Starbucks, which is essentially drinking motor oil. Of course, if you put enough sugar in motor oil, it will taste good, I'm sure, at some point. Anyway, what are you guys drinking? Somebody said they're drinking tea. Sarah, did you think that was funny? I thought, I don't know, I can't stand Starbucks regular coffee. Their lattes maybe, but coffee's supposed to be pure, man. It's a seed, and it goes rancid. You have to brew it and drink it shortly after that. Shortly meaning within a few weeks. When's the last time somebody checked the date on when their coffee bean was brewed, right, before drinking it? Nobody ever does. Only coffee aficionados do, like me. You're drinking a Starbucks blonde roast. If I had to pick anything, I would go blonde with Starbucks. It's actually one of the more mild roasts, but yeah, but you can't drink it black. Do you drink it black? I don't know. I couldn't drink blonde roast black. You'd have to put some heavy cream in there or something. I'm curious to hear if you're still watching, if you drink it black. Tell me you don't. You have to try this stuff. If anybody wants to try what I'm drinking, happy to send you some. Brewed right here in Arizona with oat milk. I guess whatever floats your boat, man. If that's your only option and you have Starbucks blonde roast, I guess go for it. Personally, anybody who knows me knows that I just don't like Starbucks black coffee. Anyway, so point of today's conversation is to talk a little bit about Robinhood. I'm not an expert at securities law, not an expert trader, but there's a lot of banter online, and when people banter online, half of them are wrong. More than half are wrong. More than half are just speculating, just talking about random stuff, just hype what they hear in a headline. A very small sliver really understand what's going on. And then, maybe there's a portion who really understand what's going on. Most of us don't. And I don't know that I know everything about what's going on with specifically Robinhood and halting trading, and the importance of internet forums, But let's just lay the landscape as far as what I know and get some context. I think that's important, right? So we know that Robinhood is a licensed broker dealer, registered broker dealer. They're registered with FINRA and SIPC. They are a broker of securities. It's an application. It's a trade-free application, meaning that they don't charge a fee to trade on Robinhood. It's a very popular app among younger generations, but even a lot of adults use, a lot of older traders use Robinhood. And so that's one side of the story. Robinhood is a, early stage company. They've raised a ton of money. They're in operation, obviously. And most people believe that Robinhood, true to the name, is about robbing from the rich and giving to the poor, right? Or at least that's the vibe. That's the concept. Making trading a household name, if you will, making trading accessible to everyday users. That's sort of the name of the game for Robinhood, right? That's what they pitch themselves as. Anybody who wants to disagree with me or add, please chime in. And if you want to join the live conversation, you can make a request. I'm happy to add you in. At any rate, Robinhood. And so internet forums, let's put internet forums on the other side. So Robinhood over here, internet forums and retail investors here. So retail investors are people like you and I who buy and sell, typically not in large volumes like institutional investors. We buy, we may hold, or we may day trade, but we're the smaller guys. We buy at the retail level. So smaller guys are the same guys who are operating these forums, these Reddit forums that you keep hearing about when you talk about this controversy. And so what's the role of an internet forum, if you will? Let's take a second to understand that. These are chat groups. It's public information. Nobody's claiming to be an insider. We'll talk about why that's important. But the idea is that people are leveraging information, leveraging technology, leveraging real-time transactions. There's forums, and there's tons of forums. Reddit just happens to be one of them. They're in the spotlight. And there are particular people who are very savvy in these forums. I've been in several of these forums, and by all means, they're professional traders. But the important thing is they're non-institutional professional traders. They're trading retail stock. And they like to share strategies and chat. That's what internet forums are all about, is the free flow of information. So one hand, Robinhood, the app. One hand, you have retail investors who are exchanging information in the internet forums, Reddit, and specifically here. And problems arise. What are the problems? Anybody who's watching know about the problems? The problems arise when Robinhood as an application halts the ability to buy certain stock. And we'll talk about what that is, what that means, why that's a big deal. But that's what they did. There were certain positions taken by investors that people say were not kosher with Robinhood's strategy, their own personal balance sheet, if you will. And therefore, Robinhood caused the stocks of these particular companies, publicly traded companies, to crash or to crater. That's one theory. But I want to make sure everybody understands this interaction. You have in these chat rooms people who their objective is to make money, just like big hedge funds. They don't have access to massive amounts of capital. So what do they have access to? They have access to information, public information, but they place bets just like you would on any stock or in a game, in a UFC match. One person's rooting for a winner, one person's rooting for a loser. In this particular case, there are people who were hedging their bets that a stock will go short. So they went short on it, meaning that the stock would tank. And so they take short positions, which allows them to buy more stock at a bottom of the barrel price. And there are other people who are banking on the stock maintaining its value or increasing in value, right? And so the question is, when you have those kind of divergent interests in a public market, why is that a big deal? And my position would be, that's exactly what you want in a market. You want, just like in a UFC match or in a baseball game or in a basketball game, you have the odds. People bet the odds. There's winners and there's losers. But the idea is that it's a free market system, right? Nobody is manipulating the system. Nobody is, it's a fair game. Everybody's basing their decisions on the same information that's available. And you could understand why somebody would be frustrated if, let's say, you're betting on a UFC match, and you tell Conor McGregor, let's say you're gambling on Conor McGregor on one hand, and you have Floyd Mayweather on the other, right? Good hypothetical. Nothing wrong if you bet on Conor McGregor losing and Floyd Mayweather winning. But it would be wrong to go to Floyd and say, dude, we want you to lose this game, and we'll pay you $10 million extra, but we want you to lose this. No big deal. Or maybe 10 is not enough for Floyd. Maybe he needs 20 million or 100 million. I don't know. But the point is, you fix the match, as they say. You say, listen, fall down round 2 minutes in, just don't get up. Okay, make it as grand as you want. We don't care. We don't care how many hits you land. We don't care how bloody the match gets. Just lose in the second round, particularly after 2 minutes. We would all have problems with that, even if you didn't have money in the game, because it suggests that anybody can manipulate the market, the sports betting market, and that's slimy, right? Especially when you put enough money behind it, especially when it's the big guys. That's what people are saying happened here. That's problem number 1. Which is Robinhood speaks to, allegedly, their board of directors and their shareholders who may have positions that are different than retail investors. Remember, we talked about those guys in the Reddit forum. And therefore, Robinhood simply panders to the retail investors when in reality, allegedly, Robinhood was simply trying to make their buddies a bunch of money. Their buddies being the large institutional investors. That's the allegation, if you will, that Robinhood, by halting the ability to buy and only allowing sales, is artificially controlling the price, i.e. causing it to tank. If you can only buy and you can't sell, that puts you, or if you can only sell and you can't buy, that has an impact on pricing volatility, right? As people bid up the price of a stock, more activity can increase volatility. It generally bids the price of a stock up, artificially, if you want to call it that. So GameStop happens to be one of several, a handful. AMC is another, right? AMC Theaters is another. But, GameStop was just one, the more popular one, that went up over 1,000%. Why did it go up over 1,000%? That's the important question. And here's what I find really fascinating. For the first time in a long time, and I mean in a long time, you are seeing control in the marketplace. Whether you like it or not, whether you think it is something that they're legally allowed to do, you see an artificial hand in the marketplace, Robinhood. This is not the SEC. This is not a regulatory agency, and I think this is really, really important to understand. The halting is being done by Robinhood, the app themselves. Okay? Can only sell, can't buy. Impacting price. Let's just assume that's true. We know it's true. The interesting thing about this is retail investors were up over 1,000%. Why did that happen? The reason it happened is because retail investors, again, going to these Reddit forums, and there are many other forums, we're just picking on Reddit for a second, they're studying the price. They're studying the options, the contracts on the price, and the options available were telling us, market data suggested at the time, that large investors, hedge funds, were taking short positions. Why is that important to know? A short position means you're betting the stock price is going to tank. You're betting it's going to go short. And when you as a retail investor are banking the other way, you're going to say, you know what? Why do these guys have to win? Now, let's understand something before we say anything further. Is it market manipulation to at a large volume buy a bunch of stock knowing that the price is going to go up as a result of that action? I don't know. It might be gaming the system a little bit. The truth of the matter is that's how the free economics of the stock market work. The price can change and will in fact change based on the volume of activity. That's in fact what a lot of the volatility in a stock reflects on a day-to-day is trading volumes. You can actually track, you can go to Yahoo Finance, you can go into the graphs of the stocks, and you can chart trading volumes versus stock price. And depending on the company, depending on the industry, depending on the market, it could be a one-for-one track. Greater the volatility, or the greater the trading volume, the greater the price will start to trend, etc. Right? So the point of the story is these guys in Reddit started talking about the price and the options that hedge funds were taking going short. So they said, you know what? We want to go the other way. We're holding a bunch of GameStop stock, and there's a lot of history that I don't necessarily think is entirely relevant, but on who the primary person who created this Reddit forum and what his personal financial stake in this is, and put all that aside for a second. Financial interests are important, but at the end of the day, it's a few dudes, a few gals in a chat forum talking about, hey, these guys are betting against us. So I want to make sure I win if you're going to bet against me, without actually artificially intervening in the market. We know that retail investors don't have the ability, like Robinhood, to stop trading. They don't. I suppose they could do it by doing something illegal, but that's not necessarily what happened here. So these retail investors say, you know what if we cause the price to go up? Makes sense. Not very complicated. Robinhood, or I should say private hedge fund, institutional investors are banking on the stock going down. I'm banking on the stock going up. How do I help keep the stock up? I'm going to create a bunch of activity. I'm going to start telling people to buy. I'm going to start outing the short positions. And there's nothing better in a public market than people fighting over the value of what they think a stock should be. So what happens? Price starts to go up. What do these hedge funds do? In order to, there's more background to this, but in order to hedge against their bet of the stock going down, they're buying more stock now. So now they have to buy more in order to hedge against their bet that it was going to crash at a particular price, because they're leveraging, usually they're borrowing money, or they're borrowing the stock, they're borrowing against the stock. So they're not even using cash positions. And in order to make sure that they have enough mitigated their risk, they also have to buy, or they have to jump out completely, right? Because and cut your losses. But almost instantaneously, when the price starts going up and you're hedging down, it's creating a large gap, which results in a loss. You're realizing a loss on your option to sell, right, at a certain price. And so that gap is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so these larger hedge fund, non-retail investors are freaking out. They're hedging on it going down. They stood to make billions of dollars. On the other end, you have retailers who are like, dude, my stock is up 100%, 200%, 1,000%. GameStop was up over 1,000% in the last few days of trading, just a few days ago. So what did Robinhood do? They basically said, listen, you can't buy, you can only sell. If you say you can only sell, it creates a sell-off, right? It creates in the minds of investors this idea that something's going to happen. I either need to sit or I need to sell. And just within, I don't know how long the stop was. Maybe somebody who's watching this knows. I don't recall how long it was. Maybe it was 24 hours of halting the trading of certain stocks. So when Robinhood said you can no longer buy, you can only sell, indeed, it did exactly what Robinhood suggested might happen, and all the other investors suggested might happen, which is that the price started to come down, which is not a very nice place to be if you're buying like crazy as a retail investor, because now you're realizing the losses immediately. So understanding the forces at play here, large institutional investors, small retail investors who are trying to bid the price up. One hand, people are alleging, well, these guys in a chat room shouldn't have the right to be able to use information and trading volume to manipulate the stock price. My argument is people do that every day. That's what the stock market is. It's the free market system with very little impediment. That's what you trade on. Day traders do that every day. People who invest through their 401k or what have you don't necessarily play the trade game every day. So we got a couple questions here. Have you placed positions on GME? No, I haven't. No positions. I have no skin in the game, fortunately or unfortunately. Another question. Do you think it's negatively or positively impacts Robinhood's reputation? That is such a good question. Such a good question. I'm going to pin this question here. So clearly, many retail investors have a very grim view of Robinhood. And we'll talk about legally whether Robinhood can or can't do what they did in a second. But the public's perception is Robinhood, you guys are supposed to be Robin Hood, literally, and you guys are supposed to be protecting us. Instead, you artificially caused the price to crater. And when you caused the price to crater, we lost. So how the heck are you protecting our interests? Very simple. Robinhood's response, the CEO, you can watch some of his interviews on YouTube. The short of the short is, hey, this is not what it looks like, okay? We are a licensed broker-dealer. We have fiduciary responsibilities to execute trades, but we also have, obligations to trading houses. We have deposit requirements. We have regulatory requirements. And though it wasn't a regulator who asked us to or put pressure on us to stop these buys, we had to do it to protect a storm, basically. That's what the CEO has said. You can go and watch his interviews on YouTube. I'm not sure I completely understand it, and maybe I'm not sophisticated enough of an investor to understand it. I happen to think I have a good understanding of these things. I didn't quite understand it, but let's just say hypothetically Robinhood has deposit requirements, and therefore if large swings are happening in the market, what does that do? If you're used to having deposits requirements of $100 million with brokerage houses, right, who are executing these trades, and suddenly that jumps to $1 billion. Who's making up the balance of the 900 million? Okay, that's one argument. Maybe Robinhood, in fact, they claim it's not a liquidity problem, although that is how liquidity works. That's the definition of a liquidity problem, I think. So I don't really understand that. Maybe you're watching this and you do. If you do, drop a comment. And if this is a recorded version, you can put a comment in our post. But I don't really understand the deposit requirement versus the liquidity argument, right? To me, they're one and the same. If your deposit requirements are going crazy and you're a brokerage, you're a broker dealer like Robinhood, then maybe your retailer investors don't have as much confidence in you. To go to your question about negatively impacting Robinhood's reputation, I absolutely think this has negatively impacted their reputation. Most of us don't have trust in the free market system because we don't think it's a free market system. We think it's manipulated or subject to manipulation. And I think this is an example of that. Remember, Robinhood is a trading platform. They don't charge money to their users. They're making money somehow. They're telling everybody, hey, you can't buy anymore on these particular stocks. There's lots of volatility. Sorry. And so the question is, what is their financial incentive to do so? Do they have a financial incentive to do so? And I think the answer is yes, they do. Yes, they do. They're not making money on the execution of trades anyway. So the popularity of their platform is different than, the volume of activity doesn't impact their revenue directly. So it's something else, right? We know that. And if you've read, I guess we'll get to the terms of service in a minute, but let me finish this thought. If you've read about how trading works and how Robinhood makes money, then you know that the volume of activity doesn't directly translate into them making more money versus some of the other platforms like E-Trade, where they're charging you money on a trade or on a volume, right? Nothing to do with how Robinhood works. But anyway, I think this just amplifies the distrust of retail investors. I mean, how do you go back on Robinhood and truly believe that they're executing their trades? They have a fiduciary obligation to you to execute the trades that you put. And suddenly they're saying, hey, we don't think it's in your best interest to actually execute this trade. How does that square? Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm going to stop for taking a sip of my coffee here. Anyway, I think if you've ever used the application or if you've ever downloaded an app, period, you know that every app has terms of service. Hopefully you all know that. And maybe this is something that we analyze later. But real quick, every app has terms of service. Terms of service are the contract between the app and the user. And we can argue that, who reads those things, and nobody reads those. I wasn't aware of them. But of course, with many, it's kind of industry standard now that when you download an application, you have to click accept. You have to click accept. And so there's evidence that you did accept when you, or at least that you purported to have read the terms of service when you downloaded and signed up for a service, right? And your email address is recorded. Typically your IP address is recorded. The time, date, geolocation is recorded, among other pieces of data when you sign up for an application or a website, and you click agree. So there's a clear record that you agreed to the terms of service and privacy policy. The issue is, did you as a user read the terms of service and actually comprehend and agree to the terms? And there's a spread in case law across the country on whether the terms of service, what the requirements are on a terms of service to make them binding, and whether you acquiesce and there's evidence of intent and all that stuff. But assuming it's done correctly, and I think it is in this case, you agree to quite a handful of trading terms with Robinhood. Anybody who's not used this app, you can just go to the Robinhood disclosure library and just read their agreements. There's all sorts of agreements that Robinhood has, right? All kinds of terms, specifically terms that say going short. What does that mean? What is our obligation? One of their rights, I'm just going to read this to you. This comes from Robinhood Financial and Robinhood Securities Customer Margin and Short Account Agreement. I don't know if this is embedded within their terms of service. Maybe somebody can tell me. But this section specifically says, Section 5, Robinhood is authorized. I'm reading directly from their terms. Robinhood is authorized in its discretion for any reason whatsoever it deems necessary for its protection, without notice, to cancel any outstanding order, to close the accounts of the customer in whole or in part, or to close out any commitment made on behalf of the customer. Any commitment. Close your account. Halt. Plain English there. Very short, actually well-written provision. It's not legalese. It's not buried somewhere, kind of. Very clear that they can stop the trade. You don't have to you don't have to get a call from the SEC for trading to stop. They're a brokerage. They can opt not to execute the trade. We just read one of their provisions. By the way, it's the first time I'm reading this. There's all sorts of terms here. And as a user, here's what I would have to say. As a user, it's your obligation. It's your obligation to know what you're getting into. Here's the question. Hi, Sarah. Can users just pull their money from Robinhood, or do they have to sell? That's a great question. I think in order to liquidate your account, you have to sell, right? Because it's just like in any other trading platform. If your money is booked into a stock or group of stocks or into a fund, you can't simply just say, well, I want to withdraw my money, because your money's not actually there. It's within and invested within an asset. So you'd have to sell, you'd have to liquidate and cash out, which is what a lot of people did when all this GME stuff started spiraling, right? They cashed out and they lost money. But some of them made money. Some people were up. I was getting texts like, hey man, my stock is up $36,000 and I have to sell. I can't buy more. Or they're halting trading. What's up? And they opened trading up again, but sure enough, they only did it after the price tanked a little bit. So many people made money even on that move, right? But to answer your questions, somebody else may be able to tell me who's more familiar with the trading platform, but you can't just there's no way to kind of pull your money off of a trading platform. You have to sell. You have to execute. You have to liquidate. Hopefully that made sense. But I'm just looking at these terms, and I'm scratching my head and I'm thinking, how is a class action lawyer going to actually stand in front of a judge with a straight face and say, hey, Your Honor, my client didn't waive their right to a class action. My client, notwithstanding the fact that Robinhood says in their terms of service, and defense counsel has evidence that my clients actually, signed and clicked to agree to these terms of service, I still think this case should proceed, Your Honor. I'm going to follow this case. I'm going to watch. And I'm not dogging plaintiff's counsel on behalf of the class. But I have to say, there is a class waiver in these terms. There's an express provision for all sorts of, disclaimers that we can terminate your account, that, we can stop. We don't have to execute your trade for a lot of different reasons. There's risks. There's acknowledgement of risks. There's specific provisions on short sales, right? And collateral not held in an account and all kinds of stuff, discontinuation of the service. What happens if Robinhood just folds up? They're a company. What if they're underfunded and they wrap? I mean, those are risks of using any platform. I understand the argument. There's a lot of people banking on it. We expect it to be a well-funded and do the right thing type of platform. But at the end of the day, there's a business risk associated with even signing up for an application like this and trying to execute a trade. There is. They're not a perfect company. Technology is not perfect. And certainly, what if the SEC was to come in and shut down, trading? And in this case, that's not what happened. But what if they were to do that? Are you going to blame Robinhood? No, you can't. I understand why people are blaming Robinhood now. But my point is, their terms make it clear from a lawsuit standpoint that you can't really do this. You can't really proceed with the class action lawsuit, right? Let me see here. Here's another question. Robinhood 2021, steal from the poor and give to the rich. The irony, yeah. I agree with that sentiment. I think that's the irony in all of this is Robinhood, this is what people really are learning from this, which is Robinhood cratered the stock, damaged in the billions, retail investors. And what it appears to be is protecting large hedge funds from their short positions. We know for a fact that there were short positions by large investment banks, by hedge funds. Again, nothing wrong with that. There's an entire industry to shorting, dedicated to making money on shorting a stock. But in this case, it would appear that the platform favored those investment executions and not those of retail investors. That's the allegation, at least. Here's a question. Is it common practice to waive the right to class action lawsuit? It is. And it's almost become industry standard. There's a lot of case law on this. Jurisdictions tend to be a little split on this at the district court level. What is required in the waiver? It's actually a really good question. What's required in the waiver? How informed was it, etc. But class action waivers are generally enforceable. And it goes down to, what language was used, what was the exchange. Some jurisdictions don't like it as much, but the truth of the matter is you can waive a class action. You can do it in a terms of service. Many class actions have been dismissed on this basis. Doesn't mean that you can't sue as an individual plaintiff or even multiple plaintiffs with the same counsel. That's not a class, right? You have to be certified as a class. But the plaintiffs' class action group of lawyers who have taken to this, it's funny. It's a rush to the courthouse. And if you look at some of these class action lawsuits, for anyone who's listening that wants to look at these, there's typos. There's somebody who filed a class action lawsuit spelled class action wrong because it's a race to the courthouse. They're just set it off quickly. Let's get it filed. I mean, if you think about the speed at which these guys moved, it was within hours. There were lawsuits filed within hours of Robinhood halting this. Why not include it 100% of times in terms of service? I mean, this is one of those things that some people don't even have proper terms of service. Some people don't have proper terms of service. And that's one of the big takeaways from hopefully this discussion on the B2B, B2C side. I don't think it's there because many people who draft these things don't know what they're doing. They get it from somewhere else. They cut and paste. They manipulate language a little bit and say, this looks right. You haven't talked to a competent counsel who can advise you on whether those provisions are enforceable, particularly in your jurisdiction. If you're a nationwide platform like Robinhood, They'll only allow U.S. Users, but it's nationwide. Anybody can use it. How many people are as sophisticated when it comes to their web terms as they should be? The risk is there. It's a contract with your users. Imagine if I said you're going to be doing a deal 1 million times this year. You're going to be doing a transaction 1 million times. You're a business. And I said, but you don't really have and you don't really know what your written terms are in each of those 1 million transactions. How comfortable are you? And that's the issue. When you have scale, when you have mass users at scale, as a company, you need to be thinking about, how do I protect myself? I think Robinhood did a fairly good job, and maybe we'll do a separate one where we actually highlight the terms of service and go through them with you, and show you why these things are important for users to read and understand, but also the platforms to have. And I'll be interested to see how judges respond to these arguments that plaintiffs' counsel is likely to make. Right now, we're just at what we call the pleading stage. There's only a complaint filed. But my point is this: how stupid are you as a business owner, an e-commerce platform, if you don't have well-defined terms of service and you have millions of transactions in a year, some per day, depending on the size, right? I mean, you talk about companies like Amazon. I mean, the scale at which they're transacting business. You have to push the envelope to a degree. You have to make sure your terms are very thorough, they're very detailed, they're well written, they're clear, they're understandable. It's not a bunch of thick text legalese. These are things that I teach my students when they're drafting terms of service in my program, where I train students how to work with early stage companies. And this is a lesson to be learned, which is you have to dive into those terms. You have to make sure you understand them as a user, but also on the business side, you have to understand from a drafting standpoint what you're putting out there for consumers to click to agree, right? It's going to be really interesting. Let's see. What other questions do you guys have? Love a good terms of service. I agree, Sarah. I think, I know why you're saying that. I think, again, there's no one size fits all. There are a lot of terms in a contract. Like, I think there should always be an alternative dispute resolution provision in every terms of service. No company wants to operate at scale and have to worry about litigation, right? So in your jurisdiction, if every opportunity to waive a class action or any sort of litigation comes in, where you can slow down somebody coming to the courthouse steps, that's what you want to do, right? That's what you want to do. Why wouldn't you do that? As one of the listeners asked, why not include it 100% of the time in your terms of service? And the answer to that question is most people just don't know what the hell they're doing. They're cutting and pasting, and they don't read on the legalities on these things. And I don't know. I'm skeptical of how far this lawsuit will go. I think it will unearth a lot of issues with the platform. Sure. I think it will unearth the polarity between retail investors and large, hedge fund type investors and people who take short positions. There's already, Google search terms are trending, short trades, Robinhood app, Reddit. These terms are now trending in Google search. You can look that up. I think more people are gonna learn from this as to what apps can actually do or can't do, what they can do with your data. We tend to always think about terms of service. We sort of narrow it down to privacy, but here's a perfect example of an execution issue, something that can literally stop you from using the app, and people get all upset. Oh, how is this possible? It is possible. What we don't like about this Robinhood issue is the fact that they seem to be sort of playing off this idea of, we like you retail investors, but sticking it to them. That's why this smells bad. We have yet to really understand. Again, personally, I don't know that I completely understand Robinhood's position, which is that we're trying to protect retail investors and that they have their own depository requirements when they're executing trades. I'm not, because that sounds like saying you have a liquidity problem. I don't know. And if you have a liquidity problem, you're not a very reliable platform for trading, for brokering, right? That's my argument. But I get it. If you have a bunch of people, if you have a bunch of people who are suddenly trading onto the platform, so you went from 5 million users to 20 million users suddenly, then I could understand the argument, and maybe that's their position. But did you really have to stop the buying? You could still sell these 5 to 10 stocks, GameStop being one of them, but you couldn't buy. I don't know. It's really, really strange. Yeah, interesting legal issue. I think there's another question. How do you know if somebody agreed to the terms of service? Well, I was saying this earlier, the company has the obligation to track who checked the box, if you will. And you should always have it as a checking the box and not buried somewhere as a link. You should always force your users through the pipeline of clicking to agree to the terms. You shouldn't simply say, these are our terms, go read them. But yeah, I think I think this will be extremely, extremely interesting to see how these class action lawsuits proceed. I don't know that they have a tremendous amount of merit unless they can somehow undermine the waivers that are within the Robinhood terms. I'm looking at them right now, and they look pretty good to me. Clear arbitration. They have FINRA arbitration. Again, not uncommon either. I've represented fintech companies, and we put this kind of language into the terms of service. Where they actually say these transactions are governed by XYZ state law, California in this case. This agreement, all transactions made in my account shall be governed by the laws of the state of California, regardless of the choice of law rules thereof. Love that. Except to the extent governed by the federal securities laws, FINRA rules, and the regulations, customs, and usage of the exchanges or market and its clearinghouse, on which transactions are executed. Love that. If I'm defense counsel, I'm pointing to that. Hey, we made it pretty cool, even to an amateur investor, that we're subject to FINRA rules, security laws, regulations, customs, and usage requirements of clearinghouses. One of their requirements is large cash deposits for highly volatile trading. That puts us in jeopardy, Your Honor. We could do whatever we want. Here's what it says in the terms. Boom. I think here's a comment. I think the public sentiment is with the Redditors. May need a Senate hearing. Yeah, no, I fully agree with this. I think whenever you have something that doesn't pass the sniff test, the legal issues are a little different, but whenever you have something that doesn't pass the sniff test and you piss off the right amount of people, there's going to be investigation. Do I think that there could be something more to this? There could be manipulation, and maybe that's what gets investigated, right? Was somebody using insider information to execute a trade? Or, that's certainly something within the scope of FINRA or SEC. But the idea that, how do you protect consumer from a consumer protection standpoint? Does anything else need to be added in? And I don't know how I feel about this personally. Web-based businesses are already responsible for so many things. If we're going to add another layer of protection, I don't know. Again, I didn't lose a bunch of money. I didn't make a bunch of money either. But whenever you use a third-party tool, a brokerage tool, particularly a web-based application, to do anything, there are inherent risks. And if it is just plain risks relating to the platform, I would say this is all overblown. But I think here what smells bad is the fact that the conduct by Robinhood favors the large private investors. I think that's what smells bad, and I think that's what retail investors are throwing a fit about, and probably rightfully so. One of the things that we haven't talked about yet that I just want to throw out before we get into the terms of service anymore is this idea of the importance of internet forums and chat groups. In my practice, I'm dealing with defamation and harassment quite a bit, and obstructions to B2B in the B2B, where people create these forums to tank a company, right? So kind of a little ironic. It's the other way here. People were tanking, trying to tank a stock for their personal benefit on the retail side. But my point is, internet forums are a powerful thing, and internet forums are protected. They're protected by the First Amendment in the sense that you can say whatever you want in these forums, and you can't get shut down. Of course, the forums themselves can get shut down. Reddit could probably censor you. But my point is, no judge can order the forum to be shut down, except for rare situations, right? If it's tortious conduct, or something that's otherwise engaged in harm, or if it's otherwise unlawful. But I just want to emphasize something. The small guy's winning. Or losing in this case. That's a huge thing for any e-commerce entrepreneur. You know, you can really leverage a brand. You can really leverage your presence by building credibility in some of these forums, right? Doing the opposite of what happened to Robinhood. If you have people that are in these forums who are watching, who have their finger on their pulse, maybe this didn't have to happen. Maybe Robinhood could have sent an alert to their users. I don't know if that in fact happened. Like I said, I didn't trade GME on Robinhood. I'm curious to hear, did traders get warned that, hey, this is highly volatile? We're giving you notice that there are problems. We may have to intervene. I don't know, but that's an interesting question. Certainly if this gets litigated, that will come up in discovery. But really, it's such a powerful thing to have internet forums. So much can happen in a forum. You know, the spread of information, disinformation campaigns, influencing an entire market. I mean, that's huge. That's powerful. And that's democratic, and that's part of our free market system, that you can have that information. Of course, the opposite's all true. We all know that you can even swing an election through disinformation. So it's the Wild West. I always tell this to people. If you're getting into e-commerce, it's the Wild West. Information is flowing in all different directions, and sometimes it's accurate, sometimes it's not. You bank on it as a consumer, you know, the almighty Google search, or maybe you're in a forum like Reddit and you act on what other people sometimes tell you to do or what they believe. There are risks. I just want to point this out. Section 38 of the Robinhood Terms of Service, arbitration. This agreement contains a pre-dispute arbitration clause. By signing an arbitration agreement, the parties agree as follows. All parties to this agreement are giving up the right to sue each other in court, including the right to a trial by jury, except as provided by the rules of the arbitration forum in which a claim is filed. Number 2, arbitration awards are generally final and binding, etc., etc. I mean, here it is, black and white. No person shall bring a putative or certified class action to arbitration, nor seek to enforce any pre-dispute arbitration agreement against any person who has initiated in court a putative class action. I mean, there's so many stops to a class action, and this is making arbitration the exclusive forum for any dispute on the Robinhood platform. By the way, these terms of service looks like they're 2020 December, so this is, I think, the most recent, unless they changed it overnight. But 100% clearly articulated, in my mind, governing law, choice of forum clause, non-legalese, written in a way, it's bolded, written in a way that any user who's reading this would understand that they're waiving their right. Let's see. Yeah. I mean, this looks good, folks. I don't know. Like I said, I'd be curious. I'd be watching this case very carefully. In fact, the terms of service were revised on December 30th, 2020 for the Robinhood Financial LLC and Robinhood Securities LLC customer agreement. And when you read these terms, by the way, you get a good understanding of what's happening behind the scenes, because right away you learn that there's a security clearinghouse. I shouldn't say clearinghouse, but there's the securities seller, and then there's some other entity. Maybe one is the licensed broker-dealer, maybe one is the one who operates the app, and one's a parent, one's a subsidiary. I don't know. The point of the story is these terms are pretty damn clear as to what the rights of the parties are, and the inability to seek a class action lawsuit or even litigation. And there are risks and just all kinds of disclaimers for short positions, margin positions. You've got the SEC Rule 606, 607 disclosures. There's a lot here. So I don't know. I'm going to watch this just because I'm a nerd and I like to see what happens, what shakes out in the marketplace with terms of service. I draft these things all the time for my clients, and we have to enforce them often. And this just looks like a situation where I don't think Robinhood retailers will win. I think this is probably just a class action shakedown. It's an attempt by plaintiffs' counsel to squeeze money out of them. But I don't think it answers a bigger question, which is, does anything need to be done about the ability for private platforms who operate as broker-dealers, and whether there needs to be any further protections for retail investors on the consumer side? I don't know. Maybe there's another argument here, right? Maybe the argument is these disclosures don't go far enough. They don't disclose a conflict of interest. I'm sure there's a conflict of interest policy in here somewhere. Let's see if we can find it. Conflict. I don't know. How does it affect those who sign up before? Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I would have to look at the different versions. This is simply the version that is as of December 30th, 2020. So maybe that language was in there since the day the app launched. You'd have to look at the versions. But these class actions were filed so quickly that I don't think anybody analyzed any terms of service. To me, as a legal analyst, if you will, if I'm looking at this and I'm saying you brought a class action under a situation where there's a clear class action waiver and arbitration provision and a choice of law and having to go through FINRA arbitration, etc. Maybe they have a good argument that language wasn't in there when some of the putative class people signed up and used the app. I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me because you're talking about a cause of action relating to trades that happened certainly after these terms were in place. Does that make sense? So if you signed up before December, I guess to answer this question, and the terms were absent, there is no class waiver, there is no disclaimer for we can halt your positions and we don't have to execute your trades. If that was missing before all of this stuff started happening, which I don't think is true. You're talking about, remember, this is dated December 30th. This stuff's happening, 2 days ago? But let's just say, hypothetically, that language wasn't there when you signed up. You signed up last year or the year before. Then this language was added, let's say, in December 30th. Let's just assume that's the case. Did the application provide notice of the changes? There's a good legal question. In certain jurisdictions, you have to provide actual notice. So many of you have seen that. If you've signed up for, for example, LinkedIn, any change to their terms of service or privacy policy, you get an email. These terms were changed. This is how they were changed. Click on this. By continuing to use it, by continuing to use the application, you're agreeing to these revisions. If you send that via email to the email account that's set up, hard to argue you didn't have notice of the amendment, right? If you do it the way that other people do it, which is just amend the changes, you just amend the terms, and you don't give notice, I could see why there might be a problem. Even if your terms say we can amend this at any time, there is case law in certain jurisdictions that basically says you can't simply unilaterally make a change to your terms without providing actual notice to your consumers. You can't just embed it into a link, right? That is evergreen and just changes all the time. You can't. I don't think that's enforceable. Most jurisdictions actually have caught up to this issue. That's a good question. Well, I think that's it for today. I don't know. It's really an interesting issue. Who knows how far these class actions will get? I certainly think that this is not going to go away. I think this is an issue that's going to come up again. Robinhood, I don't know what they could do differently. Perhaps maybe they give their users notice in advance before they halt the buying of certain stock. But I think this conversation's not going away. The legal issues, even if the classes get dismissed, I think the issues are still there. And I think overall, Robinhood certainly has damaged their reputation quite a bit in terms of the distrust now that users are going to have with the platform. I think that's just unfortunate. It's unfortunate, but that's just the way it is. Again, business risk. You as a user, you jump on a platform, you expect it to do exactly what you downloaded it to do. You're not paying for it. I understand there are exchanges, and certainly Robinhood has an upside for free users. But you took a risk, right? Everybody does in market, in trading, especially, but even when you use an application. And that's the kind of question we're battling is it, do we blame this and just say, retail investors, you took a risk on an application and that's the end of it? Or is it Robinhood, you shouldn't have halted this. This is market manipulation, and it's manipulation that favored your real customer, which are the larger institutional investors. I don't know. But I'm not sure there's a cause of action here. Not convinced yet, as bad as it went for retail investors. Anyway, I hope you guys had some good coffee. And until next time, if you guys have questions, you're watching this, you're watching it after the fact, drop us a question. Happy to answer it in a later video or answer it in the comment section below. All right, guys, take care.